My family and husband abandoned me in a hospital bed to enjoy a $30,000 cruise. But when I returned, I made sure they'd beg for my forgiveness and regret. My name is Malene Carter. I am 32 years old, an architect living and working in Seattle, the city where skyscrapers cast their shadows over Lake Union at every sunset. I have been married to Brandon for 6 years. We are both deeply career-driven, and because of that, having children has always been postponed for someday. Our apartment is in a high-rise downtown, just a few light rail stops from my office. From the outside, my life might look like a modern dream, a stable career, a well-furnished home, a handsome and courteous husband always busy with business trips. But behind the door that closes every night, I often feel a quiet emptiness threading through every breath. Lately, I have been pouring all my time and energy into a major project called the Aurora Complex, a modern green architecture development that, if successful, could be the stepping stone to a senior partner position at my firm. This project is not just work, it is a dream I have chased since I was an intern, a structure that could transform the entire neglected northern part of the city left behind by outdated urban planning. That afternoon, as the winter sunlight tilted across the bare trees on Pine Street, I returned home after 10 exhausting hours of blueprints, technical reports, and endless meetings. Just as I took off my shoes at the door, I heard Brandon's voice from the living room. "You're home. Was today okay?" His voice was still warm, still familiar, but with a distant undertone. I forced a smile, hung my coat on the rack, and walked into the living room. Brandon was on the sofa, his laptop open in front of him, but his eyes were glued to his phone. He put it down when he saw me. "I almost missed the train back," I said, half joking. "Seattle rush hour is no joke." Brandon gave a faint smile, but it faded quickly, replaced by his usual composed and slightly distant expression. "I get it," he said. "Your work's at a critical stage, but don't you think it might be time to slow down a bit? I mean, spending time together matters too, right?" I hesitated. It was not the first time he had said that. Lately, he had been bringing it up more often, each time more subtly, like he was testing the waters. "The Aurora project will be done in a few months," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Once it's finished, we can take a long vacation or even start thinking about what's next." Brandon nodded, saying nothing more. The room fell into a soft silence, lit only by the glow of the building across the street. The next morning, I woke up early to prepare breakfast. As I brushed my hand over the calendar on the fridge, I noticed something small but striking. Next week was my 33rd birthday. I turned to Brandon just as he came down the stairs, his tie still uneven. "Next Friday, do you have any plans?" I asked casually, though part of me hoped for something. Brandon paused, then looked at me apologetically. "Oh, I have to go to Los Angeles for a meeting with the partners," he said hesitantly. "It's been scheduled for a while, kind of hard to move." I tried to hide the flicker of disappointment in my eyes. "It's okay, I understand, work's important." "I'm really sorry," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I promise I'll make it up to you." I nodded, but deep down the letdown lingered. In that moment, I recalled the many times he had said, "I'll make it up to you," and each time, nothing ever really got made up. I did not know when the distance between us began, only that it had grown more noticeable, like fine cracks in concrete that seem harmless at first, but, if ignored, one day could become a break too wide to repair. And I had no idea that the upcoming birthday week would be the moment that changed my entire life. On Saturday evening, a soft rain began to fall in Seattle, droplets trailing down my windshield as I drove to Riverstone, the restaurant where my parents had invited me for dinner with my younger sister Sienna. I was not surprised to hear Sienna would be there. In my memory, there had never been a family dinner where she was not the center of attention. Sienna is 3 years younger than me and used to be the face of a well-known fashion brand on the West Coast. She always knew how to shine, from her cinched silk dress to her glittering earrings. It is like the light just naturally followed her. While I battled deadlines and construction plans, Sienna's smile on Instagram was enough to make the world shower her with praise. And of course, my parents never stopped complimenting her. I walked into the restaurant, my hair still slightly damp from the rain, and saw them already seated at a window-side table. My mom, Elaine, glanced at her watch, then frowned slightly when her eyes met mine. "Malene, you're late," she said, not harsh but with that familiar tone of quiet comparison. "Sorry, it's raining, and I just left the construction site," I replied, pulling out my chair. They needed to adjust the glass canopy structure. "It's always about work, my dad, Gerald," said softly, barely louder than a whisper, but I heard it clearly. Sienna smiled and gently touched our mom's hand. "Mom, do you see this bracelet I'm wearing? It was a gift from last week's gala event. They gave it to VIP guests only." My mom leaned in for a better look, her eyes lighting up like she had just spotted a rare antique. "It's beautiful, so elegant, totally your style," she praised, completely forgetting I had arrived just 30 seconds earlier. I sipped my water, staying quiet. I had not felt sad about the favoritism in a long time, but the silence still left a chill in my heart. When the main course arrived, I tried to steer the conversation. My Aurora Complex project just finished phase 1. The city gave very positive feedback. There's a good chance I'll be considered for partners sooner than expected. My dad looked up for a few seconds, then returned to his knife and fork. "That's good," he said, "but don't get too caught up in it. You're at that age. You should start thinking about having kids." I set my utensils down, trying to keep my tone calm. "Brandon and I are still thinking about it. We're both busy, but Brick," my mom interrupted. "You're 33. You can't keep putting it off. I want a grandchild before it's too late." Sienna chuckled playfully. "Come on, Mom. She loves her work more than kids, probably needs a few more projects before she'll even think about diapers." The words were gentle, but they stung like velvet-covered thorns. I looked at my sister, hoping for a hint of empathy, but her eyes only sparkled with amusement at my discomfort. "You don't really believe that, do you?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. Sienna shrugged. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're always serious, always at the office. And Brandon, I don't even know when you two last had a date night." My parents did not step in, just stayed silent, as if Sienna's words were the natural truth. I clenched my hands under the table. What they did not know was that I once dreamed of having a family too, but that dream kept getting postponed, buried under contracts to sign, meetings that ran into the night, and the growing distance between me and the man I once thought would always be my safe place to come home to. That night, when I returned to the apartment, Brandon was sitting on the sofa, the dim living room light casting soft shadows across his face. I gave him a brief recap of the dinner, trying to use the gentlest words possible. "Hebrew same as always?" he asked, remote in hand but eyes on me. "Brr," I nodded. They talked about children, and Sienna chimed in too. Brandon put the remote down and walked over to wrap his arm around my shoulder. "Don't let it get to you. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. Brr." I rested my head on his shoulder, but the feeling lingered. There was something in Sienna's eyes tonight that made me uneasy. Not just the usual sarcasm, but a strange confidence, like she knew something I did not. I am not the type to worry needlessly, but my gut has never been wrong. Brr. The week before my birthday passed like a whirlwind. The Aurora project had entered the rooftop construction phase, and I had to be on site almost every day. The pressure weighed on me, and the long, quiet nights in the empty apartment stretched even longer. Brandon said he was preparing for a business trip to Chicago, a meeting with a partner that could not be postponed. I did not ask further. To be honest, I had grown used to his unmovable trips. Early Friday morning, on my 33rd birthday, strong winds suddenly swept through Seattle. Rain pelted the scaffolding, forcing the construction team to scramble and reinforce the safety frame. I wore a hard hat, a thick coat, and walked with the head supervisor to check the glass canopy outside the main hall. "I want to extend this overhang," I said, pointing at the design on my iPad. "If we adjust the slope here, rainwater will drain more efficiently." "I see that. But, Miss Carter," he hesitated, "it's really slippery over there. How about I check it for you?" I smiled and shook my head. "It's all right. I just need a quick look." I stepped onto the slick steel platform, holding the railing for balance. But as I neared the edge of the scaffolding, I heard a faint screech from a metal sheet below. Everything after that happened too fast, a slip, cold air rushing beneath my feet, then someone's scream carried by the wind. I woke up in a bright white room, the smell of antiseptic thick in every breath. My head throbbed, and my right leg felt immobile. A quiet, rhythmic beeping came from nearby, and a gentle voice spoke. "You're awake. That's great." I slowly turned my head. A blonde nurse with her hair tied neatly and a kind face stood by the bed, looking at me with concern. "I'm Nina, your attending nurse. You fell from the third-floor scaffolding. Your right leg is broken, but thankfully, there's no spinal or internal damage. A brick." I nodded slightly, trying to stay calm. "How long have I been here?" "Avery, just about 3 hours. We contacted your emergency numbers." "Abro." I blinked. "My husband. Does he know?" "We left a message, and I also called your mother as listed in your medical record." I turned my head toward the window. The gray sky outside did nothing to mask the chill slowly spreading in my chest. I quietly picked up my phone to check. A message from Brandon. "Heard you had an accident. I'm at the airport heading to Chicago. Might not make it back in time, but I'll call after the meeting. Try to get some rest." "Broka." I exhaled softly, quiet. A few minutes later, a message from my mom. Unfortunate timing. "Dad and I have to babysit for Sienna today and tomorrow. I'll visit next week. Take care. No birthday wish, no real concern." I set the phone down and closed my eyes, not out of sadness, but because it all felt too familiar. That evening, as twilight settled, Nina returned to the room. On the tray she brought was a small cupcake with a pink candle. "Happy birthday," she smiled, lighting the candle. "Abrahi," I blinked. "How did you know?" Abrahi, Nina shrugged. "Your birth date was in a file. I know birthdays in hospitals aren't much fun, but still, today deserves a candle." My throat tightened. I nodded, trying to smile, but tears suddenly welled up. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." "Oh, I do," Nina said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone. When I blew out the candle, I did not make a wish. There were no wishes left, only emptiness and a vague sense that everything in my life was about to change in ways I could not yet imagine." 3 days after the accident, I started getting used to the hospital routine. The early mornings began with the sound of medication carts rolling by. The dim sunlight slipped through the curtains, and still, that aching silence from the people who were supposed to be here. Brandon had not shown up. Each day, he sent only a few short texts, blaming packed meeting schedules. My mom and dad were completely absent, no calls, no check-ins. My sister Sienna only sent a heart sticker Monday night with a message, "Heard you fell, get well, swamped." I gave a dry laugh reading that. There was a nameless ache growing in my chest, but I kept telling myself to stay strong, be logical. Everyone has their own life. I have used work as an excuse to avoid family too, have I not? One afternoon, after Nina helped me change the bandages and stepped out, I pulled out my phone to check work emails. The Aurora project was still going smoothly, thanks to the engineers and project assistants managing things remotely. Still, I felt helpless not being there myself. As I scrolled down the screen, a notification popped up on Instagram. Sienna just posted a new story. I tapped it instinctively. In the short video, my sister was lounging by a pool, holding a glass of fruit juice, her hair neatly tied in a bun, oversized sunglasses on. Behind her was a stretch of blue sky and the pristine deck of a yacht. A yacht. I sat up abruptly. Pain shot through my leg, and I gripped the blanket tightly. I opened Sienna's profile and scrolled through her recent posts. Lavish images, banquet tables, roses, champagne, all tagged at Avalon Yacht, one of the luxury cruise lines offering getaways around the San Juan Islands. I frowned. No one in the family had mentioned this trip. Not a word. I kept scrolling. Among the accounts Sienna followed, one name stood out. CP2 Diary, with a profile picture of a beach at sunset. I tapped on it. The account was private, but the bio read, "My real diary for family only." Curious, I sent a follow request. Less than 10 minutes later, it was accepted. I could not believe what I saw. It was Sienna's secondary account, where she posted things she would never share on her main profile. Not the polished photos, not the edited highlights, but raw, unsettling moments. The latest post was a photo of a dining table on the yacht with my mom, dad, Sienna, and Brandon. I held my breath. Brandon was sitting at the head of the table, smiling, holding a glass of wine, with my mom leaning in beside him, beaming. Below the photo was the caption, "Finally having real fun." No one around to ruin the vibe anymore. I quickly scrolled through the previous posts. Another picture showed Brandon lounging on a beanbag chair, wearing a white t-shirt and sunglasses. The caption read, "Brandon's a great liar. I'm in a meeting in Chicago, more like meeting by the pool." My hands started to shake, the phone screen blurred through my tears. I could not take my eyes off those words. All the years of trust, the late nights working, the moments I tried to be the ideal wife, turns out it was all one-sided. They had planned to cut me out of the picture on my birthday while I lay immobile in a hospital bed. They raised their glasses on a yacht, laughing like I never existed. I took a deep breath and wiped my tears with the back of my hand. Nina walked in at that exact moment, holding a cup of juice. She paused at the doorway when she saw me. "Malene, what's wrong?" "Bro." I held out my phone for her to see. Nina's face froze. A moment later, she stealthily placed her hand on my shoulder. "Oh my, they really did this." I nodded, my throat tight. "I've been betrayed by my entire family and the man I called my husband." Nina gave my shoulder a soft squeeze, saying nothing. I sat there for a long time. In the silence, I stared at my phone screen, where Brandon and Sienna's faces still smiled brightly. They did not expect me to find out, but now I had. I opened the screenshot tool and saved everything, and for the first time in years, I did not feel afraid. There was only one thing growing inside me: determination. That night, after discovering the truth, I could not sleep. The photos, the mocking captions, Brandon's smile next to my family, they played in my mind like slow, searing cuts. But instead of feeling crushed, I felt as if I had stepped out of a fog that had clouded my mind for years. The next morning, I hit the call button for Nina, and when she walked into the room with a tray of meds, I said directly, "You said you had a relative who's a lawyer, right?" Nina paused for a moment, then nodded. "My sister Lauren, she's a family law attorney. Do you want me to reach out for you?" Burka, I nodded. "As soon as possible, I need legal advice and maybe to start divorce proceedings." 4 days later, I was discharged from the hospital, my legs still in a brace, but my mindset had completely shifted. Brandon never came to pick me up. No calls, no messages. I did not tell him I was leaving the hospital either. Instead, I called Avery, my best friend from college, the one who had been there for me even before Brandon. "There's always a place for you at my place," Avery said over the phone. "Don't go back to that apartment. Not right now." She lived in a quiet, cozy 2-bedroom apartment in Fremont, completely opposite of the cold penthouse I used to call home. I moved in with just a suitcase and my laptop, enough to start over. My first meeting with Lauren was in her office on the 10th floor of a glass building overlooking Lake Washington. She was in her 30s, petite, with sharp eyes and an unnervingly calm voice. After I laid out everything, Lauren nodded slowly. "You have strong evidence, photos, public posts, and even the deceptive messages. This is not just a breach of trust, it's a breach of marital commitment." I handed her a USB with all the screenshots from Instagram, recent call logs, and messages from Brandon. "Are you ready to take this to court?" Lauren asked. Burke. I was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I don't want a war, but I won't stay silent anymore." Bricky Brandon started calling a week after I did not return home. At first, he sounded gentle, then worried, and eventually suspicious. "How long do you plan to stay away? Why won't you talk to me?" he said tensely during a Saturday night call. "I need time to heal," I replied, "and to sort things out." I was not lying. I really was sorting things out, my whole life. When the divorce papers were officially filed, Brandon did not react immediately, but the following week his lawyer responded with a request for 70% of shared assets, including our current apartment and joint investments. Lauren just smiled while reading the letter. "We'll respond with a statement that we're fully prepared to present all evidence in court," she said, "and we'll emphasize that, if this goes public, his personal and financial reputation could take a serious hit." 3 days later, Brandon's lawyer called back, his tone completely softened. "My client would prefer a more peaceful agreement. He's willing to give up the apartment entirely and won't request a share of the financial portfolio." Lauren looked at me. "Do you want to accept this offer?" I nodded. "I don't need much. I just want my freedom." In the weeks that followed, I focused on recovery and gradually returned to work remotely. The Aurora project was still progressing well. My team kept me updated, and surprisingly, they were doing great without me. I did not feel left behind. I felt liberated. One late evening, Avery and I sat on her apartment balcony looking out at the golden city lights reflecting off the lake. I held my tea mug a little tighter. "Do you regret it?" Avery asked softly. "Abricker?" I shook my head slowly. "No, if I regret anything, it's not doing this sooner." And then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. "Heard you stirred everything up. Have you thought about the family's reputation?" Keybricher? I did not respond. I just stared at the words for a long moment, then deleted the message. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed them to define my worth. I knew who stood with me now, and more importantly, I had finally chosen to stand with myself. 2 weeks after finalizing the divorce, I decided to close another chapter I had clung to for too long, my biological family. I sent a simple message to my mother. "I want to see you and Dad just once. Ibrahre." It did not take long to get a reply, all right. Sunday afternoon, same house. That morning, I sat in front of the mirror for a long time, not to choose an outfit, but to remind myself that I was not going there to apologize, and certainly not to seek the approval I should have had long ago. My parents' house in the eastern suburbs of Bellevue looked just as it did the last time I was there: neatly trimmed garden, crisp white curtains, and the stone statue of a nightingale by the walkway, standing silent like a wordless gatekeeper. I stepped up the porch and rang the bell. My mother opened the door, her usual coldness impossible to hide. "Come in," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Your father's in the living room, reading the paper." I stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of lavender and something else, too quiet, too stifling. My father, Gerald, looked up when he saw me. He folded the newspaper, set it down, and crossed his arms. "I thought you were too busy," my father said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "She brfer." I did not respond. I pulled out a chair and sat down, face to face with the two people who gave me life, who raised me, and who chose to love Sienna with all the affection that should have been shared. "I didn't come here to argue," I began, keeping my voice calm. "I just want to say what I need to say, one last time." My mother crossed her arms, her gaze sharp as a blade. "If this is about us not showing up at the hospital, don't bother. Everyone was busy, and Sienna had a prior engagement. It's not just about the hospital," I cut in, for the first time in my life, not hesitating to interrupt her. "It's years. It's the dinners where I was ignored. It's the holidays where only Sienna's name was celebrated. It's the way you always compared me. It's Dad's silence while it all happened, Abrahi." My father frowned slightly. "You're an adult, independent, with a job and a husband. We thought you didn't need, I let out a quiet laugh. Not mocking, not bitter, just full of regret. "I used to think like you, Dad, that if I succeeded, I'd be loved. But that's not how it works. Love isn't a reward, it's a foundation, and I never got that from this family." "Brewery," my mother gripped the arm of her chair tightly. "You're too sensitive. You can't accept reality. You always think of yourself as the victim." "Eber." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Mom, I don't see myself as a victim anymore. I just refuse to keep playing the invisible one." "Eber." The room fell silent. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photo, a picture of Brandon, my mother, my father, and Sienna toasting on the yacht. I laid it on the glass table without a word. My mother's eyes widened for a moment, and my father fell completely silent, his expression hardening. "So you know," my mother whispered. "Ah, Bersh." I nodded. "While I was lying in a hospital bed on my birthday, and you were out celebrating like I didn't exist." My father stood up and turned away, as if trying to escape the truth. My mother, though trying to remain composed, could not hide her unease. "Brandon told me the trip had nothing to do with you, that you were too busy, didn't want to come." "Ibersha, and you believed him?" I looked at her steadily. "I don't blame you for being deceived. I blame you for never asking me, only choosing to believe what you wanted to." "Aber," I stood up. "I didn't come here to take anything back. I came to say I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need to be free. I'm done waiting for validation. I've chosen my own life." I turned to leave, but before I stepped out, I stopped and spoke clearly. A real family doesn't betray each other. A real family doesn't leave someone out of the celebration without a single word. If that never existed here, then I'll make a new one for myself. "Avery," my mother said nothing. My father did not look back. I walked out of that house for the last time, carrying with me a soul that felt weightless, free from resentment, free from pain, just free. Abrook. On the way back, I rolled down the car window. The cool April wind brushed against my face, sweeping away everything old. I was no longer Malene Carter, the daughter who once longed for love from her blood family. I was now the woman who chose to love herself first. 4 months after that final goodbye, I officially signed the paperwork to launch my own architecture firm, Lumen Studio. The name came from a lighting design concept, Lumen, the unit that measures the amount of light emitted from a source. I wanted my company to be just that, a source of light, small but steady and unmistakable. Lumen Studio was based in a small loft space in Capitol Hill, overlooking moss-covered rooftops and cherry trees leaning over narrow streets. I did not start with a big team, just me, a fresh-out-of-school architect named Jaden, and Arya, a multitasking admin who also handled scheduling. But the three of us shared a belief that architecture was not just about building, it was about healing. Our first project came from a chance conversation. One day, I was attending a community seminar at the local medical center with Nina, the nurse who once cared for me. After the session, a middle-aged woman came up to speak with me. Her name was Monica Hale, executive director of Sunny Haven, a children's shelter on the south side of the city. "We're looking for someone who can redesign the old nursery and toddler wing," she said, eyes both hesitant and hopeful. "The building's from 1972. The plaster's falling apart, there's barely any natural light, and funding is tight." I looked at the old floor plan she handed me and nodded without hesitation. "We'll do it. No design fee." Sunny Haven became our turning point. Jaden and I visited the site weekly, rebuilt the entire model, and proposed energy-saving solutions, natural light optimization, and open play spaces for the children. Though small in scale, the project gained strong community attention, and that is how Lumen Studio's name started spreading. But not all changes came from work. One late afternoon, as I was sketching a section of a vaulted ceiling at the office, Nina walked in with a mischievous smile. In her hand were 2 takeout coffees. "Coffee for the dedicated architect, and I've got something to propose," she said, then winked. "Are you free tonight? I have someone you need to meet." Fee, I raised an eyebrow. "Who am I meeting?" "Bury, my brother," she answered quickly. "His name's Matthew, a pediatrician at Seattle Children's. He's a bit too quiet for his own good, so I thought he could use someone a little stronger to pull him out of his world of stethoscopes and charts." I laughed. "And you think that person is me?" "You're more than..." Our first date took place at a small cafe tucked beneath golden maple trees. Matthew was just as Nina had described, tall, a bit reserved at first, but with incredibly kind eyes. We talked through the entire meal, not about anything grand, but the little things. He told me about a 4-year-old boy who loved dinosaurs so much he demanded T-Rex-themed bandages. I told him about a 3rd-grade boy at the shelter who helped me choose the paint color for the new playground. After that evening, we started seeing each other every weekend, sometimes walking around Green Lake, sometimes just sitting on the porch drinking tea and reading. It was not loud or fast, but it was gentle and deeply sincere. I did not think I could believe in beginnings again, but Matthew did not come into my life to fill a void. He made me realize I could live fully, not by proving myself or carrying everything, but by giving and receiving freely. One late night, as we were folding Lunar New Year gift boxes for the children at Sunny Haven, Matthew suddenly said, "I used to think you were too strong, like you didn't need anyone. But then I realized, maybe it's because you're strong that you deserve real love." I froze for a second, still holding a piece of orange wrapping paper. "It's not that I want to save you," he added, "but if you'll let me, I'd like to walk beside you." I did not say anything. I just reached for his hand and held it tightly. For the first time in years, I did not feel like I had to stand alone, and that is how I knew my life, though once broken, was being rebuilt stronger than ever. One early March morning, as tulips began to bloom along Seattle's tree-lined streets, I received a letter in a cream envelope with no return address. Strange, I rarely received handwritten mail anymore, not in an age of emails and texts. I opened the envelope. The soft handwriting was instantly familiar from the very first line. "Malene, I don't know where to begin, but maybe it's finally time to say everything." I read each line slowly, without stopping. It was from Sienna. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. What Brandon and I did, there's no excuse. I always thought I was the one who had it all, the one who got the better end, but in the end I realized I made the wrong choice. Sienna explained that after the truth came out, Brandon had been investigated for embezzling funds from a project he once managed. He lost his job, his reputation crumbled, and he was even temporarily barred from practicing due to ethical violations. My family, my mother and father, had invested their savings into high-return opportunities Brandon had promised. It all vanished. They had to sell their old car and move in with Sienna in her small apartment on the west side of the city. Ironically, Sienna wrote, "Only now do I understand what it feels like to be discarded, used, and I wish I hadn't turned my back on you back then." I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I did not need to hold on to it anymore. I did not feel angry. I did not feel satisfied. I only felt certain of one thing. I made the right choice. Leaving toxic relationships, even ones labeled family, was necessary for me to fully live as myself. My 34th birthday arrived on one of Seattle's rare sunny days. There were no expensive gifts, no grand banquet, just a small, cozy gathering in the backyard of the new place I had just rented, with the people who truly stayed by my side through it all. Nina came early, bringing her homemade salad. Avery showed up with a red velvet cake that still smelled like butter. Jaden and Arya, my close colleagues at Lumen Studio, put together a photo board of all the projects we had completed in our first year. I stood in the garden, looking at the string lights draped across the trees, listening to the happy chatter and laughter, and felt like a piece of my heart had been gently stitched back together with real kindness. Matthew arrived a little later. As usual, his hospital shift had run long, but when he walked through the gate, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas and wearing a warm smile, I knew that was enough. After dinner, everyone asked me to give a speech. I had not prepared anything, but I did not need to. I stood up and raised my glass. Thank you all for being here tonight. There was a time I thought I'd never feel that sense of belonging again, the feeling of family. But I've realized family isn't where you're born. It's where you're chosen to stay, where you're respected, where you're lifted up. Brisha, everyone clapped. I smiled and was about to sit back down when Matthew stepped forward and placed his glass on the table. "Wait," he said, his voice steady and deep. The crowd fell quiet. I looked at him, puzzled, until he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small navy velvet box. And then he knelt down. "Malene Carter, you are the strongest, most independent and sincere woman I've ever known. But what I love most about you isn't your strength. It's how you still believe in love even after being hurt. I don't want to change you. I just want to walk with you. Will you build a new home with me, not of bricks and stone, but of trust and respect?" Kibber, the whole garden went silent. I covered my mouth, tears in my eyes, then I nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I will." A bricaire, cheers erupted around us. Matthew stood, pulled me into his arms as applause and warm congratulations surrounded us. I rested my head on his shoulder and whispered through my breath, "At last, I've found my real family, not by blood but by love, unconditional, unwavering." And in that moment, I knew I was truly beginning a new chapter. No more fear, no more doubt, only light shining from those who chose to stay and from my own heart that dared to rise again. From my story, I've learned that sometimes, to find the light, we have to walk through the deepest darkness. Family does not have to be where we are born. It is where we are heard, loved, and never betrayed. I lost a lot, trust, relationships, even illusions. But in return, I found myself. Life does not restart, it simply shifts course. And when we are brave enough to let go, the right things will always find their way to us. Dang Hien T 9023436700830,620,260